Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I hope everyone is doing okay. Let me check your sound. I always check your mic. Good, and come on. All right, this one is not going to be, always check your mic. That's right. This one is not going to be too long. Lauren Steiner is going to be here at 8 o'clock. We had a bit of miscommunication for the 5 o'clock time, but nevertheless, she'll be here at 8. So, in the meantime, one or two stories popped up on my radar. It never fails. There's always something. So, let's start here. You know, there's some, one of the most famous periods in history were book burnings. Essentially, there are certain parts of information, or certain bits of information that jives with what we want you to know as the state. We want people to know X, and the people are trying to learn Y. And so in order to constrain people trying to learn Y, we get rid of Y. So you only have an overabundance of X. In addition to this, you have changes to the historical record itself, meaning not just certain information that we want you to have, but changes, tweaks, alterations to the historical record. So if people look back on the historical record, they would think history was one thing as opposed to being something else. Take a look at this. I find these pictures awesome. 6 people who were literally erased from history. Look at this guy. He's there, but he's not. Jang Song-dak disappears from the photo in the right. After news of his execution, Jang Song-dak, Kim Jong-un's uncle and close advisor, broke in December 2013. North Korean state media has erased the man from history entirely, deleting him from online archives and photos. Look at this. Stalin had this guy executed. And then after he had him executed, he had him deleted. Airbrushed out. Hitler. This is Goebbels. Erased. Trotsky. This is a famous one. I love this one. Stalin hates Trotsky. Every fiber of his being, he hates him. And was able to get some measure of revenge before killing him by essentially having him deleted from history itself. Actually, this may be after killing him. I don't know. But whatever. He has him erased from history. And again, I'm pretty sure you can find multiple cases for this. And again, this one was a cosmonaut, Soviet cosmonaut, gone, deleted. Something that you're doing, saying, or your very presence is embarrassing or getting across something that we don't necessarily want to talk about. You're exposing something, you're saying something, you're offensive to our society in some way. Fast forward to us. Peter Van Buren. So Peter Van Buren, just so you see who we're talking about. This guy. Sometimes images jog the memory of a person. Ron Paul Institute executive account on Twitter. It's not just frozen. It's not just suspended. It's suspended eternally. Eternally. The world, everybody on Earth can die. And if there was any power left in the systems itself, an alien race that lands on the planet will still not be able to get into Van Buren's account because his account is suspended. I'm trying to get across this thing of this eternality associated with it. He was a U.S. service envoy. You could say foreign service. He wrote a book called We Meant Well. Now, We Meant Well was essentially him talking about, you said, what was taking place in Iraq with this anti-war perspective. Van Buren is an anti-war voice. I mean, granted, he's on the Ron Paul Institute. Ron Paul has some funny ideas about economics, but at the very least, what he talks about from the standpoint of war, I like it. Ron Paul can talk to me about being anti-war all day. And Van Buren is one of those people who's also in that camp of anti-war. He responds to somebody who's on Twitter, just so we can be very clear with what we're talking about. He gets into a back and forth with someone on Twitter. The person reports him. Now, the wild part about this is Twitter doesn't just suspend his account, it destroys his account. And everything that he had written prior is also evaporated. He's been on Twitter for 7 years. Gone, up in smoke. An anti-war voice that has been on Twitter for all that time, for the most part, Twitter has completely erased from existence. That is amazing. That is digital book burning. For all intents and purposes, you had a person who's being rubbed out of the historical record. Yeah, so making the point that Twitter at this point has the degree of almost a public interaction. It's a public forum. And in that public forum, one of the anti-war voices for the last 7 years has been erased. In the same way that these guys are in this picture, where you had forces in the society itself, in this case, issues of state. But Twitter is doing this because of pressure from state. Whether Twitter is under the control of the state directly or under the control of the state indirectly is somewhat of a moot point. The distinction doesn't really matter. Ultimately, in one photo after the next, you have somebody being rubbed out of history for either an opinion or for who they are. You have an anti-war voice in this case who was on Twitter, been taken out of existence. Peter Van Buren, that he needed to be destroyed, not just frozen, not just suspended, destroyed, eliminated from existence. And there were two other anti-war voices in solidarity tweeted out or retweet of him, Scott Harmon and Dan McAdams, Horton and Dan McAdams, both of which also have been suspended. Let's take a look at what he has to say about this towards his response to all this. Give me 1 second. All right, let's flip it. Now there's one more thing I want to show. And give me 1 second. Where is it? 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 I'm sorry. I thought I had. There we are. All right. So right here. This followed the exchange with several mainstream journalists over their support of the American war and unwillingness to challenge the lies of the government. After 2 days of silence, Twitter sent me an auto response saying what I wrote harasses or intimidates or uses fear to silence someone else's voice. I don't think I did any of that, and I wish you didn't have to accept my word on that. I wish instead you could read what I wrote and decide for yourself, but Twitter won't allow that. Twitter says you cannot read and make up your mind. They have in fact eliminated all the things I have ever written there over the last 7 years, disappeared me down the memory hole. That's what censorship does. It takes the power to decide what is right and wrong away from you and gives it to someone else. Hate what I write, hate me, block me, don't buy my books, but please don't celebrate handing over the choices to some company. It's funny that, he's for the Ron Paul Institute. I would have thought that a libertarian would have been all for this. After all, this is corporate power. This is the power of the 1% making a choice. It's their private property, right? Their private property, and their private property, they're deciding they don't like what you're going to say. I don't quite understand. If this was a government, you could have some kind of back and forth with regards to the laws and everything else that are being written from the standpoint of the government. But in this case, well, you have private enterprise. You have the 1%. What is the problem? Why don't you like what the 1% is doing with your voice when it just kind of turns you down? Now, a lot of libertarians at this point says, wait, that's not fair. This is corporatocracy. The schoolboy capitalism that they talk about doesn't exist. It's never existed. Or maybe, I can't say that. Don't want to say never. It doesn't exist. And fact is, if that schoolboy capitalism ever existed, it became the corporate capitalism. The same complaint that they make about communism, talking about its manifest, that the fact that communists turned out that way, or the Stalinist regime turned out that way, it's somewhat, well, it's sacrosanct. It became that way not because the people who are involved in the process steering it. It became that way because it's inherently evil. That's what they say. So if we're talking about this capitalism thing, well, here we go. Your schoolboy capitalism turned into corporate capitalism because all of the incentives are for it to become what it is today. And look, I'm picking on Peter Van Buren here, and I shouldn't pick on Peter Van Buren. I'm talking more so about the Ron Paul Institute, this libertarian philosophy of stuff. This is the libertarian idea of the world. Besides the point, I just want to stay with this point. They eliminated him from Twitter. Now, as a software engineer, or at the very least as I used to be, all of this is done with just the change of a flag. All of this. They were able to delete him out of history with just the change of a flag. Meaning a thing in a computer, whether you hit yes or you hit no, and you change the status of the account, and the logic says, if the status is X, don't show it. In which case, his status is now X. The state doesn't approve. Private corporations respond in kind. And those private corporations have put their thumb. Yeah, dude, you don't need to exist anymore in our historical record. I find that to be amazing. And by the way, it's not just him. It's, if you go to, look at this. Where is it? Where is it? Look at this. Look at this. This is from Facebook. Facebook closing pro-Palestinian pages, newspaper reports. Users protest over Facebook's closure of Palestinian activist groups. Facebook deliberately targeting Palestinian accounts after meeting with Israeli government rights groups say. Facebook closes accounts of Palestinian activists. Facebook shuts down several pro-Palestinian pages. That seems greatly unfair. Why are you shutting down Palestinian pages? It's not hate speech. Being pro-Palestinian, again, does not necessarily mean you're anti-Israeli or anti-Jew. Not anti-Jewish at all. I think Jewish people are perfectly fucking okay. I don't necessarily like the government. That's right-wing government. I don't necessarily like these things when they're taking policies that are going after Palestinians. You can be pro-Palestinian while at the same token not being racist or anti-Semitic. I'm pointing this is closing down a pro-Palestinian page just because it's a pro-Palestinian page is problematic, to say the least, and magnificently biased. And then you can say, well, I mean, they're a private company. They can make any decision on speech that they want. Do corporations have unlimited say in what takes place on their grounds? If an African American walks into a shop, you can't, if you're a baker, deny service to the African American on the grounds of their race. You're a little too Asian for me, buddy. I don't like serving people like you. Would never do that. That would be, unconscionable. So, look, the point I'm trying to make here is simple. You can't necessarily have this thing where you have this unlimited say-so over what you do on your grounds. Apply that to the digital space for the moment. Say you're not baking cakes. Say in the things that you're baking, what you're doing is handing out speech. You're allowing people a platform to get across what they want to say. In the same way that a baker can't deny baking a cake for an African American, can the same thing be said for the thing of speech? Meaning, if you strap that from the physical space and the physical dimensions of a bake shop and turn this to some degree into this kind of electronic digital space, why aren't the same rules relatively true? In the same way, you can't necessarily have somebody who owns the cake shop making all and every rules that's for the most part in the bounds of the shop, even to the point of who they have to serve. Why isn't the same thing true for speech? Especially when we're talking about digital speech and the ability for these multinational corporations, especially corporations that has hoarded massive amounts of market share, to be able to cut down certain speech it doesn't like, knock away other speech that it finds distasteful, even though there is nothing wrong with the speech. It's not being belligerent. It's not being angry. It's not being upset. It's not being racist or sexist or anything else. And who is making the determination about what speech is appropriate versus what speech is not? When you get to the point that people who are saying that Russia didn't hack us, when does it get to the point where those people are undesirables? they just took down an anti-war voice because that particular person was responding to something that someone else said. Back and forth, multiple journalists. In fact, let's see what he said, because it wasn't anything insane. I looked at it and I was like, what am I looking at? People send abusive stuff to me all the time. How are they not taken down, but this guy is? Right here, let's flip this over. Twitter suspends Ron Paul Institute executive's account 1 day after big tech blocks InfoWars. And I didn't flip over. All right. Several libertarian figures, including Ron Paul's Institute director, have found their Twitter accounts suspended. It comes after big tech giants with right-wing journalist Alex Jones banning his show from the platforms. Radio host and editorial director of antiwar.com, Scott Horton, former State Department employee and author Peter Van Buren, Dan McAdams, is an executive director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity, found their Twitter account suspended on Monday, according to antiwar.com. Now, right here, Scott Horton, Peter Van Buren, and Dan McAdams have been suspended from Twitter. If you go to their accounts, you will see their old tweets, but they are prohibited from making tweets. They are reported by Cats on Earth for criticizing his posts. Please complain to Twitter. Now, I was looking for the original post. Like you said, you can't see his original post because Twitter have deleted him from history. So that's great. Yeah, I was looking for the original post. I found it at one point, but I remember not seeing the post as being abusive. That said, they've hid all of his work so you couldn't see it if you wanted to see it. So yeah, there's that. Deleting people altogether from Twitter. Yeah, I want to see the original post. Horton has been disciplined after using improper language against journalist Jonathan M. Katz. He said in a brief statement, McAdams was suspended after retweeting him. Past tweets and both accounts were available to the public at the time of the writing, unlike the account of Van Buren, which was redacted. Well, I've been trying to think of a way to quit this horrible website. Damn. Oh, right here. That's what I saw. I've been suspended from Twitter for calling Cats on Earth a boo-hoo little bitch, for tattletaling on Peter Van Buren and getting him suspended. Dan McAdams has been suspended for retweeting me. Well, that's essentially how Scott Horton got suspended. He called Cats on Earth a boo-hoo little bitch. Apparently, that's enough to get you suspended. All right, let's see. Jay Scott, yeah, Garnome, the argument needs to be regulating these big companies as utilities, not using these silly semantics as a cake shop. I feel you, but the problem is you're not going to get them as a utility. That's the thing. The silly argument here is the utility part. Now, are you saying that you want to nationalize Twitter or you want to nationalize Facebook or Google? Look, I'm all behind you. I'm all behind you. But I wager that you would be more inclined to get legislation to try to regulate how it's almost like a Bill of Rights from the standpoint of Twitter or Google or your private answers, as opposed to trying to essentially take the companies as a thing. Reading this comment section is always a trip. I hate Trump, but there's no way he's invading Iran. Creative experiments. Yeah. I'm glad you're that certain. I'm glad you're that certain. I agree his analogy was flawed. Yeah, it's not perfect fit. I agree with you. It's not a perfect fit. But I don't think the analogy is completely flawed. I mean, look, one of two things are true. Either these companies, it's private enterprise and they can do what they want inside the bounds of the company. If that's true, then it doesn't really matter. I mean, this idea of taking a company from somebody. If you can take that company as a public utility, what stops you from taking other companies? I mean, that just seems like a big jump of the shark in this country where you can't even get health care. That said, if you're trying to get a situation where people have certain rights, well, companies could exclude African Americans or Hispanics or anybody else using this thing of, this is my company, I can make the choice whoever I want. In fact, Ron Paul used to make that argument. Well, if I'm white, I can say I don't want that black person coming into my shop. That would be an argument that they can make. Well, the federal government has said that's a nonsense argument. No, if you're open for business, you're open for business across the board. Twitter is a company. Twitter is open for business. All right, great. They're not making a distinction from the standpoint of race, but Twitter, that would be hard to do. But they are making a distinction from the standpoint of speech. And that's where we get into this idea of, well, is there any level of regulation that can take place within the guidelines of what people say in order to protect speech on the platform, not necessarily leaving it to the whim of the corporation? I don't think that argument is completely flawed at all. I think that argument works. Jaron Karayaku says, watch for aircraft carrier battle groups moving towards Iran. Yes, that's almost guaranteed for invasion. Delete any anti-war voice prematurely. Now that I don't believe. I don't necessarily think they were trying to delete him prematurely. Maybe. I don't know. I'm skeptical on that one. Like, I don't think it's that closely connected, where let's get rid of this random anti-war voice and let's invade Iran because this anti-war voice will keep us from invading Iran. I don't think it's that closely wound. It's a private company, doesn't apply when engaging in other harmful practices such as dumping chemicals or insider trading. That's true. That is true. But you're kind of making my point for me, Garden. You're making my point. You're making my point. A private company doesn't allow it to do any and everything that it wants to do, even within the confines of its own space. It all trees up with Wall Street and the large investors and investment firms. But yeah, I'm extremely skeptical that you're going to nationalize Google or nationalize Twitter, not in this climate. But by the way, hey, if you can pull it off, I'm all behind you. They have behind terms of service contracts. That's true, which goes more to my argument that I think I have a better argument, at least in our space that we're in. Again, I'm not against this idea of nationalization of those two markets or breaking up Google. I don't know what that would mean. But among all the ideas on the table, I think mine is the best. So, yeah. Of course, I think mine is the best because I said it. Are you a fish down guard? No, I'm hard to see a photo. We'll do it live. We'll do it live. We'll do it live. Discrimination based on what? Political opinion? Can we take it to the courts? Well, there is, yeah, based on political opinion. Like, you're in a space of Twitter. The only way I really know who you are on Twitter is based on what you say. The same way that when you walk into a restaurant, I know who you are based on how you look. Well, whether it's how you look or what you say, aren't those things similar dependent upon the space that you're interacting? If you're in physical matter reality, you're a person walking into a building. If you're Twitter, you're a person saying something or tweeting onto a particular account. You open a door and walking into a business to buy a cake is no different. It is different. Meaning, minus the distinction between the two, between what you're doing. But you're going into a business and you're taking an action, whether it's sending a tweet, whether that's buying a cake. And the key point of buying a cake, who you are, is the thing that's being discriminated against. And the point of making the tweet, what you're saying, is the thing that's being discriminated against. It's not that I'm for, if somebody's being outwardly hateful, but I don't necessarily want the company being the clear, distinguishing, determining factor on what that means. That's all. There's only one carrier in the area right now. If 3 or more show up, instant invitations. Well, Jamal, you can't discriminate against selling a cake because the government doesn't allow business owners to discriminate. Yes, regulated. Yes, that's my point. Jay, that's my point. You're making my point for me. You're making my point. You're making my point. You're making my point. Not true. That's just us rattling our sabers. We do it all the time. Why do you think we rattle our sabers, Joe Teresa? You think they do it for shits and giggles? It's not for shits and giggles. All right, I'm going to end this here. Yeah, Lauren Steiner will be here at 7:45. So that should be a damn good interview. That's always a damn good interview. But Peter Van Buren has been erased from Twitter as we know it. Jay, I would love for these companies to be public utilities. Honestly. Like, for that matter, I would love for the train stations to be public utilities. I think in some places they are. But I would love for them to just be, we as a society collectively supply and allow people to ride the train for free from point A to point B. And we expand that rail system throughout the United States to cut down on the needs for cars in this country. I would love that. I would love if they say, yeah, let's do a green energy new deal where we're putting solar panels on house after house after house after house, where we can nail down the energy bill to something of zero for the American public, where most people, for the most part, pay zero, or we have energy going back into the power grids. I would love for that to take place. I'd love for that to take place. It's not where we are. At least not yet. So, how much time before the Lauren interview? It's going to be an hour, but I'm going to end this here and I'm going to come back on for the interview. Probably exactly an hour. I would talk to her in an hour, but we'll start at 8 p.m. So, oh, by the way, for the patrons, make sure you put in your topics that you want to put up for I guess discussion on Friday. For right now, I'm picking a Friday. I don't think I have anything planned for Friday, so let's set for Friday at 5 p.m. Regardless of what's taking place, I can always be back in time for that. So let's set for Friday, 5 p.m. I'm going to do another video kind of advertising that to make sure people know. Send in your topics. You put those topics on, let's say, put them on the current video on Patreon. Meaning I have a video up on Patreon with the last week's topics. Put the new topics on that video. That's a good way to do it. We'll choose from there. So, all right, guys. It'd be better if he discloses tax returns. Good luck with that one. I don't know if he's going to do that, my man. All right, we'll see. Look, hopefully, Joe, I hope you're absolutely right that Trump is not going to attack Iran. I don't know where you were when we attacked Iraq. I don't know where you were when we attacked Libya. I don't know where you were when we were investing in troops to attack and injure Syrians. I have no idea where you were in all these cases from the standpoint of what you thought the United States was going to do. But hey, maybe on this one, they've attacked all these other nations, but maybe this particular one, they're not going to attack. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right this one time. All right. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. Thanks, guys.